The most feared man in the city, a titan of the criminal underworld whose name was only ever whispered in the shadows, knelt on the cold marble floor. Before him stood not a rival kingpin or a corrupt official, but a 23-year-old office worker in a simple beige dress, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. He bowed his head, a gesture of absolute fealty, and in a voice that could command armies, he said three words that shattered the silence. "I am yours." How did an ordinary woman with nothing to her name bring a powerful Korean mafia boss to his knees? Their story began not with a bang, but with a whisper in a crowded cafeteria, a simple question from a little girl that would change everything. If you believe that kindness is the greatest power of all, and that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, then like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments what you think it means to be truly rich. The story of Annalise, Hannah, and the formidable man who ruled the city's darkness is one you won't want to miss. Annalise existed in shades of beige. Her dress was beige. The walls of her cubicle were a slightly different, more depressing beige, and even her feelings seemed to have faded to a neutral, unassuming tone. At 23, she had perfected the art of invisibility. She was a ghost in the corporate machine, a junior data analyst whose contributions were absorbed into spreadsheets and reports without a name attached. Her loneliness was a quiet, constant companion, a hum beneath the surface of her meticulously ordered life. Lunch was the loneliest hour. She would take her tray to the same small table in the far corner of the bustling company cafeteria, a tiny island in a sea of chattering colleagues who gathered in loud, exclusive groups. She didn't mind the solitude. She had convinced herself she preferred it. It was safe. No one could reject you if you never asked for an invitation. She would eat her simple sandwich, her gaze drifting over the city skyline visible through the vast pane-glass windows, imagining lives far grander and more colorful than her own. She saw the glittering towers as monuments to a world she would never belong to, a world of power, wealth, and connection that felt as distant as a star. The cafeteria was a microcosm of that world, a place of hierarchies and alliances, where the confident and charismatic held court, and the quiet ones like her simply tried not to take up too much space. Her beige dress was her armor, a way of saying, "Don't look at me. I'm not important," and for the most part, it worked. People's eyes slid right past her, their minds already on deadlines, promotions, and weekend plans. She was just part of the furniture, a silent fixture in their busy lives. Far across the city, in a penthouse that pierced the clouds, another kind of loneliness festered, one encased in sterile luxury. Minjun was a man forged from steel and shadows. As the reigning boss of the Chongryong clan, the most dominant Korean mafia organization in the country, his existence was a fortress of power and paranoia. His world was one of whispered orders, absolute loyalty, and swift, brutal consequences for betrayal. Every piece of furniture in his minimalist home was a statement of wealth and taste, yet the air was thin and cold, devoid of warmth or laughter. His heart was a locked room, the key long lost to a past filled with violence and loss. The only light in his meticulously controlled world was his 10-year-old daughter, Hannah. She was a sunbeam in a tomb, a vibrant splash of life against the monochrome gray of his existence. Yet, he loved her from a distance, terrified that the darkness clinging to him would tarnish her inherent goodness. He provided her with everything money could buy, the finest clothes, the most exclusive tutors, rooms filled with every imaginable toy, but he withheld the one thing she craved, himself. He was a phantom in his own home, a figure of immense authority, but not a father in the truest sense. Hannah, in her bright yellow dress dotted with white spots, would wander the cavernous halls of their home, her footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. She had everything and nothing. Her loneliness was not the quiet, unassuming kind like Annalise's. It was a loud, aching void in the center of a gilded cage, a constant reminder that all the riches in the world could not buy a simple, human connection. Her father, the formidable mafia boss, could move mountains with a single phone call, but he couldn't bridge the chasm that separated him from his own child. The collision of these two lonely worlds happened on a Tuesday. Minjun had business in the very corporate tower where Annalise worked. He was there to finalize a hostile takeover of a subsidiary company, a legitimate business front that masked his more illicit operations. Hannah had insisted on coming, a rare act of defiance born from a desperate need to be near him. While Min Jun was in a boardroom on the 50th floor, exuding an aura of lethal calm that had seasoned executives sweating through their tailored suits, Hannah was with her two stern-faced handlers in the lobby. But Hannah was clever, and more than that, she was desperate. With a quick misdirection, she slipped away, her small form in the bright yellow dress a flash of color against the lobby's muted tones. She took an elevator, her finger randomly pressing a button, and stepped out into the noisy, overwhelming chaos of the company cafeteria during the lunch rush. It was a world away from her silent penthouse. People rushed past, trays clattered, and laughter boomed. For a moment, she was terrified, a lost ship in a stormy sea. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for an anchor, a quiet harbor. And then she saw her. In the furthest corner, a woman sat alone, a calm, still point in the swirling chaos. She wasn't laughing or talking on her phone. She was just sitting there, a gentle melancholy in her posture that Hannah recognized instantly. It was the same feeling that visited her in her big, empty room at night. Annalise, lost in her thoughts, didn't notice the small girl navigating the maze of tables, her gaze fixed solely on her. Hannah stopped beside the table, her heart pounding. She clutched the hem of her yellow dress. "Excuse me," she said, her voice small but clear. Annalise looked up, startled. "Can I sit with you? Everywhere else is so loud." Annalise blinked, certain she had misheard. The little girl standing before her was like a creature from another world. Her yellow dress was made of a fabric so fine it seemed to shimmer, and her hair was tied back with a silk ribbon. She looked like a doll, perfect and pristine, completely out of place in the drab, functional cafeteria. Annalise's first instinct was a flicker of panic. Children rarely spoke to her, and she had no idea how to respond. She glanced around, expecting to see a parent rushing over to claim their lost child. But no one was looking their way. The girl's dark, intelligent eyes were fixed on her, waiting patiently for an answer. The raw, undisguised loneliness in that gaze struck a chord deep within Annalise, resonating with her own solitary existence. In that moment, the girl wasn't a stranger. She was a mirror. "Of course," Annalise heard herself say, her voice softer than she intended. "Please sit." A brilliant smile broke across the girl's face, transforming her serious expression into one of pure, unadulterated joy. She slid into the chair opposite Annalise, her small legs dangling far above the floor. "Thank you. My name is Hannah. I'm Annalise." An awkward silence fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the quiet of two solitary souls cautiously orbiting one another. Annalise pushed her plate of half-eaten salad forward slightly. Hannah looked at it, then at her own empty hands. She hadn't gotten any food. She had simply been looking for a place to land. "Are you new here?" Annalise asked gently. "My father is working upstairs," Hannah explained. "It's very boring. All he does is talk to scary men in suits." The innocent candor of the statement made Annalise smile. For the rest of the lunch hour, they talked. Hannah spoke with a wisdom that seemed far beyond her 10 years, describing her life of quiet observation, of tutors and silent dinners. Annalise, in turn, found herself opening up in a way she never had before, talking about her love for books and her dream of one day seeing the ocean. For 45 minutes, Annalise's lonely island for one became a shared sanctuary for two. When a stern-looking man in a dark suit finally appeared and whisked Hannah away with a brief, apologetic bow, the silence that returned to the table felt different. It was no longer peaceful. It was empty. That first lunch became a ritual. Twice a week, like clockwork, Hannah would appear at Annalise's table, a bright yellow sunbeam cutting through the beige gloom of the cafeteria. Annalise learned that Hannah's father's company had acquired a permanent office space in the building, a convenient excuse for Hannah to continue her visits. Their bond deepened with every shared meal. Annalise would bring extra snacks, a crisp apple or a small carton of chocolate milk, and Hannah would bring stories. She spoke of her father with a mixture of awe and sadness. "He's the strongest man in the world," she would say, her eyes shining. "He can make anything happen." But he's always so sad, Annalise never pried, sensing the invisible walls around the topic of Hannah's family. She simply listened, providing the steady, compassionate presence the little girl so clearly craved. For Annalise, these lunches were transformative. They were the brightest spots in her week, injecting color and meaning into her monochrome existence. She started taking more care with her appearance, swapping her usual beige dress for blues and soft lavenders. A genuine smile graced her lips more often, and her colleagues began to notice the change. She was no longer a ghost. She was becoming a person. Meanwhile, Minjun was also noticing a change. His daughter, who had been growing more withdrawn and sullen, was now filled with a light he hadn't seen in years. She chattered incessantly about Annalise from the cafeteria, Annalise, who loved the same books as her. Annalise, who listened to her dreams. Annalise, who wasn't afraid of silence. Suspicion, a reflex honed by years of navigating a world of treachery, was Minjun's first reaction. Who was this woman? What did she want? No one was kind for no reason. He ordered his most trusted lieutenant, Mr. Choi, a quiet, observant man who had been with him for decades, to conduct a thorough but discreet investigation. Mr. Choi's report was baffling in its simplicity. Annalise was exactly who she appeared to be, an ordinary, kind-hearted young woman with a clean record, a modest apartment, and no connections to anyone of consequence. She is unremarkable, sir, Mr. Choi reported, standing stiffly in the penthouse office. Her only anomaly is her genuine kindness towards your daughter. Minjun, the powerful Korean Mafia boss, found this information more unsettling than if he'd discovered she was a corporate spy. Unconditional kindness was a currency he did not understand. It was a variable he couldn't control, and it made him deeply uneasy. The external world, uncaring of the delicate bond forming in the corner of a corporate cafeteria, continued to turn. And for Annalise, it was turning in a dangerous direction. The company she worked for, a mid-level tech firm called Omnicore, was under siege. A ruthless competitor, Thorn Industries, was waging a silent war, poaching clients, stealing trade secrets, and systematically dismantling their market share. The pressure was immense, and the office atmosphere grew toxic with fear and suspicion. Annalise, in her role as a junior analyst, was tasked with combing through endless streams of financial data. Her mind, sharpened by years of quiet observation, began to notice patterns others missed, minuscule discrepancies, ghost transactions, and digital footprints that led to firewalled servers. It was the digital equivalent of a whisper in a storm, faint but undeniable. Something was deeply wrong. She suspected internal sabotage, a mole feeding information to Thorn Industries. Armed with a folder of carefully compiled evidence, she approached her immediate supervisor, a man named Mr. Davies. He glanced at her findings with dismissive impatience. Annalise, with all due respect, you're a junior analyst, he said, his tone condescending. Leave the big picture thinking to the senior partners. This is probably just a clerical error. Her concerns were brushed aside, her folder left unread on his desk. She was invisible again, her voice too small to be heard over the roar of corporate ambition and denial. But Annalise couldn't let it go. The injustice of it, the quiet, creeping corruption, offended her deeply held sense of right and wrong. She continued her investigation in secret, working late into the night, unaware that her quiet diligence had placed her directly in the crosshairs of a very dangerous man. Mr. Thorne, the CEO of the rival company, was not just a corporate raider. He was a man with deep, unsavory ties to the city's underbelly, a man who believed in eliminating obstacles permanently. He was a piranha circling a corporation, and Annalise, without knowing it, was about to become the bait. Mr. Choi's reports to Minjun continued. He detailed Annalise's quiet life, her solitary evenings, and her growing friendship with Hannah. He also noted the increasing stress she seemed to be under at work, the late hours, the furrowed brow she wore even when smiling at the little girl. One evening, he included a new piece of information. Sir, the company she works for, Omnicore, is being aggressively targeted by Thorn Industries. Minjun went still. The name Thorn echoed in the cold expanse of his office. He knew of Marcus Thorn. The man was a bottom feeder, a vulture who used criminal tactics in the corporate world, operating in a gray area just outside the reach of traditional law enforcement and the established criminal codes of honor that even a man like Min Jun respected. Thorn was a snake, and Min Jun despised snakes. He looked at a candid photo Mr. Choi had taken, Annalise and Hannah sitting at their table, laughing at something, their heads close together. A fierce, unfamiliar wave of protectiveness washed over him. This woman, this ordinary, kind woman, was the source of his daughter's newfound happiness. The corporate war waged by Thorn was a threat to her stability, her peace of mind, and by extension, a threat to Hannah's joy. It was an unacceptable risk. The powerful Korean Mafia boss, a man who commanded legions and controlled entire sections of the city's economy, decided it was time to intervene. He needed to see this Annalise for himself. He needed to understand the woman who had so effortlessly breached the walls of his daughter's heart. He instructed Mr. Choi to arrange a meeting, something that would appear coincidental. He would not approach her as a kingpin, but as a concerned father. It was a role he was unaccustomed to playing, a vulnerability he rarely allowed himself, but for Hannah, and for the keeper of her happiness, he would make an exception. The plan was simple. He would be waiting outside her office building at the end of the workday, a father supposedly there to pick up his child. The end of the day came, and Annalise exited her building, her mind a tangle of data points and anxieties about her job. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't see the sleek, black sedan parked at the curb, a car so polished it seemed to absorb the light around it. Standing beside it was a man who commanded attention without a single word. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit that spoke of immense wealth and power. His face was sharp, handsome, and etched with a severity that was both intimidating and captivating. As she drew closer, she realized it was Hannah's father. She had only seen him from a distance before, a fleeting glimpse of a formidable figure. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. He turned his head, and his dark eyes, the same intelligent, piercing eyes as his daughter's, landed on her. For a moment, Annalise's breath caught in her throat. This was the man Hannah described as the strongest in the world, and she didn't doubt it for a second. "Miss Annalise," he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that sent a shiver down her spine. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect that felt incongruous with the raw power he radiated. "I am Min Jun, Hannah's father." Annalise felt a nervous blush creep up her neck. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Park." "The pleasure is all mine," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Hannah speaks of you often. You have been a good friend to her. I wanted to thank you personally." His sincerity was disarming. "She's a wonderful girl," Annalise said honestly. "I enjoy our lunches very much." Annalise noticed the men in dark suits standing a few feet away, their eyes constantly scanning the street. They were bodyguards. This man was not just a successful businessman. He was someone who required professional protection. The realization was unsettling. "She seems happier lately," Min Jun continued, a flicker of something soft in his hard expression. "That is because of you." He then shifted the conversation seamlessly. "I understand your company is facing some challenges." From Thorn Industries, Annalise was stunned. How could he possibly know that? "We're going through a difficult period," she admitted cautiously. Min Jun's eyes hardened, the brief softness vanishing. "Marcus Thorn is a man without honor," he stated, not as an opinion but as a fact. "Be careful." The warning was delivered with a chilling finality. Before she could respond, Hannah came bounding out of the building with Mr. Choi and ran straight into her father's arms. Min Jun caught her, his entire demeanor shifting as he held his daughter, the fierce Mafia boss momentarily replaced by a loving father. He looked at Annalise over Hannah's head, a silent message passing between them, a promise of protection she couldn't yet understand. The situation at Omnicore imploded. Just as Min Jun had warned, Marcus Thorn was a man without honor, and his final move was as cruel as it was brilliant. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to annihilate. Using the mole inside Annalise's company, her own supervisor, Mr. Davies, Thorn's team planted a mountain of fabricated evidence on Annalise's work server. They created a false trail of encrypted emails and illegal fund transfers that painted her as the saboteur, the corporate spy who had sold her company out for personal gain. One morning, Annalise arrived at work to find 2 security guards and a stony-faced HR manager waiting at her cubicle. She was publicly fired, her belongings dumped into a cardboard box, and escorted from the building like a common criminal. The humiliation was absolute. Worse, the company announced they were pressing charges. She was facing a lawsuit that would ruin her financially and a criminal investigation that could land her in prison. Her world, so carefully constructed in its quiet, beige safety, had been utterly destroyed. She stumbled home to her small apartment in a state of shock, the box of her professional life clutched in her trembling hands. The walls felt like they were closing in. She was alone, powerless, and terrified. Hannah, arriving for their scheduled lunch only to find Annalise's table empty, was devastated. Mr. Choi, ever watchful, quickly ascertained what had happened and relayed the news to his boss. Min-jun was in his penthouse office, overlooking the city he controlled, when he received the call. As Mr. Choi detailed Annalise's ruin, the frame-up, the public disgrace, the impending legal battle, a terrifying stillness descended upon him. The cold, calculated fury of the Chongryong clan's leader rose like a black tide. Marcus Thorne had not just attacked a rival company. He had not just framed an innocent woman. He had hurt someone precious to his daughter. He had made Hannah cry. This was an unforgivable transgression. Min-jun stood up, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his desk. "Mobilize everyone," he said, his voice lethally quiet. "We're going to visit Mr. Thorne. And we're going to dismantle his entire world before the sun rises." It was no longer business. It was retribution. The full, terrifying power of the city's most feared Korean mafia boss was about to be unleashed, all for a 23-year-old office worker he had only just met. That night, a storm of silent, disciplined force descended upon Marcus Thorne. It was not a corporate raid. It was a conquest. Min-jun's men, ghosts in the night, moved with brutal efficiency. They didn't break laws in a way that would attract police. They exploited loopholes, called in debts from powerful people, and used digital warfare so sophisticated it left no trace. By dawn, Thorne Industries was a hollowed-out shell. Its servers were wiped, its offshore accounts frozen, and its most damning secrets leaked to federal authorities and international news outlets. Mr. Davies, the supervisor who had betrayed Annalise, was delivered a data stick containing evidence of his crimes and a single, chilling message: "Confess to everything, or your family disappears." He was in police custody by sunrise. Marcus Thorne himself received a personal visit. Min-jun didn't lay a hand on him. He simply sat across from him in Thorne's own lavish study and explained, in calm, methodical detail, exactly how he had been ruined. He ended the conversation by showing Thorne a live feed of his daughter, Hannah, sleeping peacefully in her bed. "You made my daughter cry," Min-jun said, his voice soft as silk and sharp as glass. "For that, you lose everything, with the battle won." Min-jun went to Annalise. He found her in her small apartment, sitting in the dark, her face pale and stained with tears. She flinched when he knocked, but opened the door when she heard his voice. He stepped inside, his large frame seeming to fill the entire room. He looked at her, at the undeserved pain in her eyes, and the final wall around his heart crumbled. "It's over," he said gently. "The charges will be dropped. Your name will be cleared." Annalise stared at him, confused.
How?
What happened? Min-jun took a deep breath, preparing to lay his soul bare. "Marcus Thorne will no longer be a problem for you, or anyone else. I took care of it. You took care of it," she whispered, a dawning horror and understanding in her eyes. "Who are you?" It was the question that hung between them, the truth he had shielded from his daughter and the world. He would not lie to her. Not now. "My name is Min-jun Park," he said, his voice steady and clear. "And I am the head of the Chongryong clan. I am what people in this city would call a mafia boss. I did this to protect my daughter's happiness and yours." The confession hung in the air, a terrifying, irreversible truth. Annalise looked at the most powerful criminal in the city, a man of violence and shadows, and saw not a monster, but a father who had moved heaven and earth for his child, and for her. The revelation was a seismic shock. Annalise's mind reeled, trying to reconcile the two images of Min-jun, the gentle, concerned father who had thanked her for her kindness, and the ruthless Korean mafia boss who could dismantle a man's life overnight. Fear was her first instinct, a cold, primal terror of the violent world he represented. She should have run. She should have screamed. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw no menace directed at her. Instead, she saw a profound vulnerability, the look of a man laying down his most dangerous weapon, his secret identity, at her feet, trusting her not to use it against him. He had saved her, not with lawyers or legal maneuvering, but with the raw, untamed power he wielded. He had done it for Hannah, but his final words, and yours, echoed in her heart. He saw her. He had protected her. In that moment, she felt safer than she had ever felt in her life. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because you deserve the truth," he answered, his gaze intense. "And because my daughter loves you. Her judgment is the only one I have ever trusted without question." He took a step closer, his presence commanding but not threatening. "Your old life is over. They will clear your name, but the whispers will follow. Thorn made enemies of powerful people. You will never be truly safe. I am offering you a new life, Annalise. A safe one. A place with us." With Hannah, it was an impossible choice. To step into his world was to leave her own behind forever, to embrace a life lived in the shadow of immense danger and power. But to refuse was to return to a life of beige loneliness, now tainted with trauma and fear. She thought of Hannah's bright smile, the first true light she had known in years. She thought of Minjun's fierce, protective gaze, the first time anyone had ever fought for her. She was not choosing a mafia boss. She was choosing a family. "Okay," she said, the single word sealing her fate. A visible wave of relief washed over Minjun's stoic features. He had risked everything on this, and she had not turned away. For the first time in a decade, the king of the underworld felt not the thrill of victory, but the profound, humbling grace of being accepted. The three of them, the lonely office worker, the solitary mafia boss, and the little girl who had bridged their two worlds, were about to become a family, forged not by blood, but by a chance encounter and a desperate, shared need for connection. The beige was gone. A future of vibrant, dangerous, and beautiful color was just beginning. Months later, the penthouse was no longer a sterile monument to wealth. It was a home. The oppressive silence had been replaced by the sound of laughter, the scent of Annalise's baking, and the soft melody of a piano Hannah was now learning to play. Annalise had blossomed. She wore a dress the color of a summer sky, and her movements were filled with a newfound confidence. She was no longer an analyst of data, but a student of art history, a passion she had long suppressed, now fully funded and encouraged by Minjun. She was also a mother figure to Hannah, helping with homework, braiding her hair, and tucking her into bed with stories, rituals of love that filled the void in both their hearts. Minjun was a changed man. The hard edges of his soul had softened. He still ran his empire with an iron fist, but his reasons had shifted. He was no longer just protecting his power, he was protecting his family. He made it home for dinner every night. He learned to smile, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes, usually when he was watching Annalise and Hannah together. One evening, he found Annalise on the balcony, looking out at the glittering city lights that had once seemed so distant to her. He came to stand beside her, the cool night air wrapping around them. "You are not afraid of me," he said, more a statement of wonder than a question. "I was," she admitted, turning to face him. "But I've learned that the monster the world sees and the man I know are two different people. The man I know saved me. He loves his daughter more than his own life. And he looks at her with the same kindness he is slowly learning to show himself." He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his touch surprisingly warm. The soft romance that had simmered beneath the surface of their strange new life finally rose, undeniable and powerful. "Annalise," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely allowed himself. "That fortress I built around my heart, you and Hannah walked right through the gates without a key." She leaned into his touch, her fear long since replaced by a deep, complicated love. She had found her place not in a safe, beige world, but in the heart of a storm, and she had never felt more at home. A simple question, "Can I sit with you?" had started it all, proving that sometimes the most powerful empires are not built on fear, but on the simple, revolutionary act of making room for one more. Thank you for watching. We hope this story reminded you that family is not always the one you are born into, but the one you find along the way. If you were moved, please hit the like button, subscribe for more emotional stories, and share in the comments what you believe is the strongest force for change in the world.